So first up, we have Rachel Carter, head of the Iowa City Housing Authority, and take it away, Rachel.
Like Kristen mentioned, I'm Rachel Carter. I'm the housing administrator for the city of Iowa City, meaning I oversee the operations of the Iowa City Housing Authority. Is that really loud or is it just me?
Just you.
Okay, good. I apologize in advance that Rachel Carr and I are sitting next to one another and presenting next to one another. In the housing world, a lot of people call us R1 and R2. And so you're more than welcome, like throw a Rachel out and one of us is going to respond. And I'm going to try to make it her most of the time. But housing Rachel doesn't even do it. I apologize for the names. We should have thought stronger about this a long time ago. The Housing Authority, Iowa City Housing Authority, like Kristen mentioned earlier, actually covers 3 counties. We cover Johnson, Iowa, and the northern part of Washington counties. We provide the Housing Choice Voucher Program, oftentimes referred to as the Section 8 program because it's part of Section 8 of the 1937 Housing Act, which is why people call it the Section 8 program. We also run a public housing program, which is subsidized units that we own and manage. We own 86 public housing units. Those are all located in Iowa City. We also own another 24, about to be 27 on Monday, affordable housing units that we rent out at or below fair market rent to anybody who meets our income criteria. Those are not subsidized, but they're based on income, and we keep the rents as low as we can. It's big, broad strokes what the Iowa City Housing Authority does. Within the Housing Choice Voucher Program, or the Section 8 program, we have 1,595 vouchers in our 3 counties. Of those 1,595 vouchers, 285 of them are reserved for households experiencing homelessness or exiting homelessness. It's a pretty high percentage. We're actually, percentage-wise, the housing authority in Iowa that serves the most homeless households with our vouchers. We collaborate with Shelter House greatly on most of those vouchers. We have 95 vouchers dedicated just for veterans experiencing or exiting homelessness. And then the other 190 vouchers we administer in conjunction with Shelter House for households with disabling conditions experiencing homelessness or other high barrier households. So we do a lot of collaboration with Shelter House. I took a look at some of our statistics at the Housing Authority regarding elderly homeless households. What I can say is in our normal voucher population, those normal 1,595, 25% of our voucher holders are elderly. And within our specialty vouchers that serve households experiencing homelessness, it's almost 60%. So looking at the percentage of people experiencing homelessness coming into voucher programs, significantly more. When we say elderly at the Housing Authority, we follow the federal definition, by the way. It's 62 for us. Other programs have a different definition, or some LIHTC may use 65, for example. Low-income housing tax credit projects may use 65, or they may use 55. Some programs use 55. I think in the housing world, it's really typical that it's 62. Just if you're curious about what we're saying when we say elderly. 62, not my definition. I would say I've gotten in trouble when I've said elderly population over 62. That's not me. It's the federal government. It's not me. So we see that the age range in our specialty vouchers for households experiencing homelessness is significantly higher. I think I mentioned our regular vouchers, about 25% are elderly. I looked at what our income levels are for our elderly households with a voucher. The average income of those households in our voucher grouping, which admittedly is a small section, but it is usually pretty representative of the low-income population as a whole. The average income of our tenants, of our clients, 62 plus, is $1,250 a month. I think that everybody, if you're in this room, you're fairly aware of what the cost of housing in Iowa City is. But just for basis for reference, our rent standards, we say your rent can't be any higher than this if you want to use a voucher. And many people tell me very often that this is too low. I know. also federally set, is $921. So we're saying it's reasonable for an apartment to cost $921 in Iowa City, and we know that your income is $1,250. So if you don't have a voucher in your hand, making that work and making it sustainable is darn near impossible. What we know in the state of Iowa, this is a statewide statistic, not local, but in the state of Iowa, renters over the age of 65, over 50% of them are cost burdened, meaning they pay more than 30% of their income to rent. So on a state level, we see this as much as we do in Iowa City. Over 50% are cost burdened. As far as homeowners who are 65 plus in the state of Iowa, I think it's 32% of them are cost burdened. So while we see this less for homeowners 65 plus, it's still happening quite a bit. 32% is still a pretty significant number when we're talking about cost burden. And in the realm of cost burden, the average Social Security retirement check in the state of Iowa is $2,110, I think, if I remember right. I have an okay memory sometimes. So we're saying that for people who are making $2,100 a month, if you're renting, over 50% of them are cost burdened, meaning they're paying more than about $730 a month for rent, which is very typical. If you find me a $730 a month apartment in Iowa City, I will do a lot to make friends with that landlord. Tell me where they are if you know of them. So I pulled some other statewide statistics that I thought were useful for us in having this conversation or thinking about the scope of the film that we watched. 25% of Iowans are over the age of 60. That's 810,000 people in the state of Iowa over the age of 60. And the state statistic is also we're seeing about half of those who are renters are cost burdened. So again, it's a growing group of people. The state of Iowa is ranked 6th in the nation for the number of people living here over the age of 85. We have a very large, comparatively to the rest of the country, over 85 population. I think I'm usually good memory. I'm going to check my notes to make sure I didn't miss anything you might want to know about. Comorbidity of disabilities with elderly status. In the elderly population in the state of Iowa, 26% of elderly persons self-report as having a disability, where it's about 13% for the rest of the population. So we're seeing our elderly households having disabilities at a higher rate, having more cost burden in their rent, and having lower incomes than our general population. So that's a group of factors together that are creating essentially what they talked about in this film, this aging population coming into homelessness. In 2006, the Institute for Community Alliance ran essentially a data analysis that showed every person served with homelessness dollars in the state of Iowa in 2006. The median age was 24. 15 years later, in 2021, it was, I want to double check because my memory, it was 37 15 years later. So within a 15-year range, we saw the median age of people accepting help for housing assistance during homelessness go up by that many years. So we're going to see this. You can extrapolate that another 15 years and what that may look like as we see this continue. There are some, big national trends that we're seeing that healthcare is better, even though it's more expensive. So people are living longer, and housing is getting exponentially more expensive. So I think that with the trending data we've seen in the last 15, 20 years, we can expect this to get significantly worse if we're not doing something. And I think they did a great job in this documentary talking about really the long-term answer to homelessness is housing. The answer to homelessness is housing. There's a lot of conversation about the different things that cause homelessness, and really at the root of it, it's a housing problem. If we had enough affordable housing, we wouldn't have the homelessness that we're seeing. So part of what I do at the Housing Authority is we advocate for and try to develop, as the case is right now, affordable housing and making sure we're prioritizing populations who need it the most. Our programming prioritizes people who are elderly, disabled, or have minor children. Those are the three groups of people we see with the highest amount of cost burden in rent and needing the most assistance. So we continue to do this. We're growing our affordable housing portfolio. And unfortunately, what happens is the rate of development for anyone, anywhere, like many communities, Portland's seeing it, Seattle seeing it, Los Angeles has been seeing it for a long time. Our rate of affordable housing development isn't keeping up with what our homelessness rates are at. So it's kind of the tricky situation we're in here locally, and we have many partners trying to help address it, including Shelter House. So that was my hopefully not too long little spiel about what the Housing Authority does. And I think we're going to wait until the end for questions, right? So I can pass off to Rachel Carr or R1 if you'd prefer.
Thank you, R2. Good afternoon, everyone. Rachel Carr, I'm the Director of Data Analytics and Compliance at Shelter House. Don't let the title fool you. While I spend these days mostly in data and making sure we're meeting all of our grant compliance at Shelter House, I have about a decade of experience in working in homelessness in Johnson County. So I'm going to talk a little bit about Shelter House, what Shelter House does. As you can see through shelter, housing, advocacy, and supportive services, our mission is to prevent and end homelessness in our community for all people. Today we're going to talk, as you saw in the video, about homelessness for the aging population. And so I want to talk to you a little bit about some of the services that we do provide for really anyone experiencing homelessness in the community, but what the kind of particular landscape is for folks who are aging. So Shelter House began as a house, hence the name Shelter House, in 1983. And then in about 2011, we moved into a 70-bed facility, which is on Southgate Avenue. And in that facility, we are 24/7. So here's a lovely timeline, which I'm not going to read everything to you about. But what's really important to understand is that the services that we have in our community for people experiencing homelessness are funded by the federal government, they are funded by the state government, and they are funded by the local government. When there are gaps in those funding services, which we are all very concerned about, particularly at the federal level right now, that is, the rest of it's supported by the community. There's a lot of community support in Johnson County for individuals experiencing homelessness, people just like you who are here to learn and understand what the landscape is. But a couple things I wanted to point out in this timeline. Shelter House really began as emergency shelter, emergency response. And then there was a shift in the federal government to really look at permanent solutions. And as R2 mentioned, the answer to homelessness is housing, right. So Shelter House also is a landlord. So we own several different types of permanent supportive housing. So we have 2 single-site apartment complexes, 60 units, and those are designated for individuals who experience chronic homelessness. So what that means is they've experienced 12 months or more of homelessness. They also have a diagnosed disability in a certain time frame. And I'll talk to you a little bit about the statistics for those programs in terms of who we're serving and the elderly population here in just a little bit. And we are so fortunate to be able to offer those services because, quite frankly, none of the individuals who live in those units could afford a regular unit. Through project-based vouchers through the Housing Authority, we're able to provide that affordable housing. I'm just going to keep going here. Okay, so here is a picture of the winter shelter. So winter shelter is an extra capacity building space during the winter months. I will talk to you in a little bit about the amount of folks who are currently sleeping outside in our community. It's staggering, and it is continuing to grow, particularly for the aging population. So in the winter, we go from 70-bed capacity in our year-round shelter to adding an additional 40-ish beds at the winter shelter facility. So as you can see, right, it's pretty crammed. It's not exactly a great space. If you think about, I really resonated with me earlier in the video when the child of one of the individuals said, you think you grow old you got money and you're relaxing and you're, enjoying life. Unfortunately, for folks who have to stay in a space like this, it's crammed, it's loud. There's a lot of stuff everywhere, and it's really, really challenging to get out of this experience alone. And so we'll talk about some of the ways that we help folks end their homelessness. So in emergency shelter in 2024, I wanted to give you some idea of age breakdown. So in 2024, if you look, we had 101 folks who were between 45 and 54. Out of those individuals, 23 experienced chronic homelessness. And something, if you saw on the screen in the film, that the average life expectancy of homelessness in Portland for a person experiencing homelessness was 49. If you were to encounter one of those 23 individuals, you would probably say that they were this age. Your body, when exposed to elements for a long, prolonged period of time, ages rapidly. 15 of those folks were also veterans. So that's something for us to keep in mind too when we think about the aging population. We have a lot of veterans experiencing homelessness who are getting older. Then from ages 55 to 64, we had 98 folks. That's annoying that the S on individuals is on the next level. Please ignore that. And then when we get to this range, this all upsets me. But quite frankly, this really upsets me. The oldest person we had in shelter in 2024 was 84 years old. So you can see, out of these folks, 6 were experiencing chronic homelessness. Then when we move into sleeping outside, so we have a street outreach program funded through, mostly through the City of Iowa City. Woo-woo, thank you, City of Iowa City. And in 2024, the street outreach worker, we have one, worked with 217 individuals. So those are people who are sleeping in what's called a place not meant for habitation. So that would be outside, that could be in an encampment, that could be in a parking ramp, that could be in a car if they are so lucky. And these are all folks in Johnson County. So this is anywhere in Johnson County that someone might experience that problem. So if you look at the numbers of age breakdown, 48 of those folks, 45 to 54, 31, ages 55 to 64, and then 5 were sleeping outside over the age of 65. Oh, and then also, too, as you can see, the eldest individual out of those 217 was 73 years old. Permanent supportive housing is what we were mentioning earlier. Excuse me. It is affordable housing combined with supportive services for individuals who have experienced homelessness for a long time. So the woman who had that camp set up, right, she reflected on she could go turn on water. That was a weird experience for her because she had lived so long without it. So if you can imagine, if you've lived for years, sometimes decades, outside, you've developed a different set of skills than perhaps someone may have living in an apartment or living in a efficiency or living in a house. And so sometimes for individuals who have experienced chronic homelessness, not always, but sometimes those folks need extra support. And so permanent supportive housing is a solution to end chronic homelessness to provide supports for people who have experienced that level of homelessness. A lot of times they may have some mental health challenges. Maybe they have a physical disability. Maybe they have a substance use disorder. Sometimes they have all three. And really to be able to learn to live inside, to learn how to have neighbors, to feel safe inside. It takes that one-on-one support. And so Shelter House is able to provide that. But if you look at the age breakdown, excuse me, we've got an aging population as well. I mean, we only have 60 units single site. So this is for all of our units, which is 180. But if we're looking at the age breakdown, it's still a decent percentage. And the one really lovely thing and one really challenging thing for permanent supportive housing in particular is it's forever. So you can live in permanent supportive housing for as long as you so choose. And many of the individuals who leave permanent supportive housing do so because they have died. They have lived out their natural life. And I have always said that being able to have your own unit, right? Being able to be in your own apartment, to be able to receive the health care that you need, and to be able to die out your natural life is much more humane than dying on the street. Excuse me. So I think that this film that we watched was spot on. I can tell you, even though it was Portland, I would say the reasons and the causes and everything that these individuals described are applicable here too. I didn't feel anything in the video. I'd be interested in my other two panelists and what they thought, but those things apply here in Johnson County as well. In terms of just some statistics for you, we have folks who are living in poverty, they're living on fixed income, but also unable to find housing to meet their needs. We had an individual who was in their mid-60s and was staying in shelter. This was in 2024, and they were in a wheelchair. And our staff, our case management staff, called 68 apartment units to see if they could provide an accommodation, or did the unit have an accommodation to be able to utilize a wheelchair in that unit. And the answer was no. So we had an individual sitting in shelter for months and months and months because we did not have any ADA accessible units. As we've mentioned, affordable housing in Johnson County, certainly in the Iowa City community, and really Coralville and North Liberty too, we have so much student housing. That's kind of the focus. Housing, as discussed in the video, is really a for-profit system. You don't make a whole lot of money running affordable housing. And then the other thing to really consider, particularly for individuals who experience chronic homelessness, often that can come with other challenges, perhaps behavioral challenges. So when we do have senior housing units where there isn't support, right? Let's say there's a senior complex, we've got lots of them, and the rent is lower, which is great, and they perhaps have an opening. Homelessness is not a protected class. So if you have someone who is lucky enough to get a bed and shelter, and they put down their address as 429 Southgate on one of those apartment applications, they can be denied for housing purely based upon having a bed and shelter. They can be denied for housing for not having a bed and shelter and having to sleep in a tent. So we see that all the time. There are many wonderful landlords in this community. There are many who will refuse to rent to someone purely because they've experienced homelessness. And I think something else that's really interesting for us to consider too, if we look at Iowa nursing home, 50% of folks in nursing homes are on Medicaid. That's a huge number. And we've had a lot of issue in the past where we have had individuals who've been staying in shelter who qualify for nursing level care, okay? They qualify. That means they need it. That means a doctor has said, this person needs a nursing home, and no nursing home will take them. Why? Anybody know? Because they don't have a permanent address. And if you think about the logic of that, right, that is purely based upon financial reasons. Because if that person becomes well enough to discharge from that nursing home, which does sometimes happen, they will have nowhere to discharge them to. And they're essentially stuck with that person. So when we're talking about the aging population, that concerns me greatly. Okay, so how can you help? Every time I'm at a panel or I'm talking to folks, they want to know what they can do to help. I would assume that some of you are interested in that. So I'm going to tell you how you can help. There's lots of advocacy that can be done. I'm not going to read every bullet point to you. Surely you all can look at it. But I cannot recall the year, but it is legal for a landlord to deny a housing application purely for the fact because the person has a housing choice voucher. So it's called source of income, right? Your source of income to pay your rent, it doesn't count if you have a voucher any longer. And that is a state law. So once we have opportunity to advocate for that to change, we should. Criminalization of homelessness. We see those bills pop up pretty regularly. Anything you can do to write or call your representatives to ensure that that does not occur. I'm going to look at the local level, make sure you're supporting your local nonprofits. There are a lot of great nonprofits in this community that support people experiencing homelessness and support the aging population. Advocate for increased affordable housing budgets. I just want to give a huge shout out to Iowa City, Coralville, North Liberty for LOST. That is going to be an amazing support to our community to advance affordable housing. Some communities have local housing voucher options. So while R2 manages the federal housing voucher, there are some communities that have county vouchers. Looking at my county friends over there, hey. And sometimes there's city vouchers. So there's way to provide that shallow subsidy that they reflected on in the video to be able to house some folks. Continue advocate for more permanent supportive housing. There will be a study release that Shelter House is currently doing with the Corporation of Supportive Housing that will share the number of permanent supportive housing units needed to support the number of folks that need that level of care in our community. We're looking at about 300 units. That seems like a lot, but in reality, I think it's very manageable. And then really making sure you're advocating to your local elected officials to move towards functional zero. In short, functional zero is a system in which we know we're never going to get rid of homelessness. There will always be some type of homelessness. But we want to make sure that the system that we have set up is that it's rare, it's short, and it doesn't reoccur. Okay, I'm going to skip that for now because I think I'm going over time. The other thing, too, is you can always donate your time. Volunteering is awesome. You should always look for ways to volunteer, whether it's through the free lunch program, whether you're volunteering at Shelter House. Donate your talents. There are a lot of resources needed to support people from a medical standpoint. So if you are a medical provider and you are wanting to volunteer and provide medical support to folks experiencing homelessness, that's really important. And then you can always donate financially as well. So I think that's all I had. Thanks. Ready, Liz? Sorry.
Excuse me. I'm Elizabeth Norris. I'm the managing attorney of the legal hotline for older Iowans at Iowa Legal Aid. I work here in the Iowa City office. So Iowa Legal Aid and the hotline for older Iowans are both statewide programs. We provide services throughout all 99 of Iowa's counties. We provide free civil legal assistance to low-income Iowans, which consist of anywhere from simple advice over the phone, through limited service. Maybe it's contacting an adverse party, like a landlord, potentially, or sending a letter to an agency to advocate for the individual for some benefits or something along those lines, or all the way up to representation of the individual in administrative and court proceedings. We have attorneys who are admitted in both state and federal courts. The hotline also has additional funding from Iowa's AAA agencies, the Area Agencies on Aging programs, and there are 6 of them throughout Iowa. That funding from those programs allow the hotline to provide services to older Iowans who have higher income and assets than the normal Iowa legal aid limits. So the Iowa legal aid limits are normally, fairly low based on the poverty limits for the income, based on your household size. With the hotline funding, we can provide services no matter what the income or assets are. We still ask when people call us because we want to be able to count them under the Legal Services Corporation statistics if we can, but if their income and assets are higher, we're still able to serve them. And then Iowa Legal Aid also generally does have other funding sources that can allow us to serve individuals experiencing certain legal issues who have higher income and asset limits. And the legal issues, in addition to housing, which I'm going to get into here, the legal issues that we provide services in generally at Iowa Legal Aid and the hotline include consumer law, which can be like, your credit card company is suing you for a debt that you haven't been able to pay, health issues, so maybe you're applying for Medicaid and you've been denied. Or the managed care organization that you're enrolled with is refusing to approve a prescription that your doctor has prescribed for you, something along those lines. We provide assistance with family law issues, domestic abuse protective orders. We've had grants for disaster issues, natural disaster issues around Iowa. Tornadoes and flooding, the derecho, things like that. We do, especially at the hotline, we do a lot of work with people who want wills. We typically send those individuals on to volunteer attorneys, so attorneys who don't work at Iowa Legal Aid but have agreed to help our clients without charging them anything, no attorney's fees. Also, individuals who want to put some advanced directives in place, so a living will or a durable power of attorney for healthcare. And then other income maintenance issues like Social Security benefits or SSI, SNAP, things along those lines. Those are the types of issues that people generally contact Iowa Legal Aid and the hotline about. Okay, let's see. So getting into the housing issues in particular, in the past 12 months, which ended at the end of October, those are the stats that I looked at today, Iowa Legal Aid opened 6,783 cases involving housing issues. That was statewide. And those involved, these are the categories that we have in housing area. Public housing. So as was mentioned earlier, public housing is when the housing authority is your landlord. They manage the property, the rental property that you're living in. You pay the rent to the housing authority or to the city. Home ownership, where you own your own home, but you're having some sort of issue relating to your home ownership. Private landlord tenant, you've got a landlord who is not the city and is not somehow, the landlord is not somehow directly involved with the federal government. Then there's also federally subsidized housing. So sometimes there's an apartment complex that has a direct relationship with the federal government. The entire apartment complex is federally subsidized. That's a separate category in our, the legal problem codes that we use in our system. Another area that we deal with is mobile home park, or mobile homes. That can be either that you're renting a space in a mobile home park, or you're having a separate issue. Maybe you own your mobile home and you're trying to sell it, and the mobile home park is causing you problems with being able to sell or list your mobile home park or your mobile home for sale. Another issue can be housing discrimination by your landlord, or a mortgage foreclosure. You own your home and you're in foreclosure. And then other housing issues that don't fall neatly into any of those other categories. So those are the types of issues that fall under those 6,783 cases that we opened over the last 12 months. Those were the housing issues. Now, in total, the cases that we opened over the last 12 months were almost 14,500 cases. The largest single problem, I told you about all these different types of housing cases. The largest single problem was private landlord tenant out of those 14,500 cases. And that was 4,790 cases. That's statewide. The next largest were combined family law issues. So that would be custody and visitation, divorce, and domestic abuse. So altogether, those issues were 3,530. But again, private landlord tenant was the largest out of all of those statewide. When you look at older Iowan housing cases over the last 12 months, and again, this is statewide. So, and we define at Iowa Legal Aid, and this is because of the AAA funding that we use. The AAA's area agencies on aging count people who are 60 years of age and older as older Iowans, older Americans. So that's the age that we use. So individuals who are 60 plus who contacted Iowa Legal Aid and we opened a case for them, 1,328 housing cases out of 2,952 total cases over the last 12 months. 709 were private landlord tenant, and of those private landlord tenant, 78 were in Johnson County. So I mentioned that our Iowa Legal Aid and the hotlines serve all 99 counties. The Iowa City office in particular serves 7 counties, including Johnson County. So we serve Cedar, Muscatine, Louisa, Des Moines, Cedar, Muscatine, Louisa, Des Moines, Johnson, Washington, and I'm missing one. Can't think of it offhand, but it'll come to me eventually. 7 counties. We've got five attorneys in our office right now. Okay. So given those statistics, all those cases, all those clients who contact us wanting help, what is it that Iowa Legal Aid can do? Statewide, over the last 12 months, I was just talking about cases that were opened. Now I'm going to talk about cases that were closed. So that's not going to be the exact same clients, because you call us in the last 12 months asking for assistance. We're not necessarily going to close your case in that same period of time, but a lot of them are going to be the same. Over the last 12 months, we closed 5,710 rental housing cases. So not all of the housing cases, not all of those housing related cases, but the rental housing cases, just over 2,000 of those rental housing cases we closed with favorable results. So those favorable results included preventing termination of a private landlord-tenant rental agreement or preventing an eviction, delaying termination of a private landlord-tenant rental agreement or preventing an eviction, delaying an eviction, preventing termination of a mobile home lot rental agreement or eviction, federally subsidized housing assistance being obtained or continued. So when you apply for a voucher, for example, it's an application process. You can be denied. You have a right to appeal that denial. And you can come to Iowa Legal Aid and ask for assistance with that appeal process. If you have a voucher, sometimes your voucher assistance, you might receive a notice that your voucher assistance is going to be terminated for one reason or another. You have a right to appeal that. You can come to Iowa Legal Aid to ask for assistance with that appeal. So those are some of those things there. And also federally subsidized housing assistance could be if you're in an apartment complex that's federally subsidized and you're maybe going to be evicted from that. Some of those favorable closures also include delayed termination of a mobile home, lot rental agreement, or eviction, or public housing assistance being obtained or continued. And then when you're looking at just the older Iowan cases over the last 12 months of the favorably closed cases, 226 of those were older Iowan clients. Statewide total was 1,060. 226 were closed favorably. Most of the older clients for these housing cases were single-person households. However, those clients or those cases where the head of household, the client themselves, was an older Iowan, those cases helped a total of 324 people because of some of them had other household members, including 34 children in those cases that were closed during the last 12 months. The clients, those cases that were closed, were nearly evenly split between genders. And 10 of those cases that I was looking at this morning were in Johnson County. And again, these favorable closings that we're looking at here, there might be other closing codes that we use for certain cases. Sometimes we close a case having just given advice, and that might be all the person needs. I'm not including those statistics here, right? I'm just looking at we prevented an eviction, we delayed an eviction, things like that. So we do provide a lot more service than what's reflected here. I'm just counting the higher level service. Other services, before we get to looking forward, other services that we provide in addition to specifically housing, other things that we can do that can help with people maintaining housing or maybe gaining housing are the income maintenance that we do, helping people protect their income. So sometimes people might fall behind on rent or fall behind on their mortgage payments because they have been sued. There's a judgment against them. The judgment creditor is garnishing their wages. Maybe their wages are protected under the law, but they don't know that. They come, they talk to us, we are able to advise them that, yeah, your income should be protected. You can file this thing in court called a motion to quash. A judge will look at it. You can present information to the judge to show that your income should be protected and that the creditor should not be taking your income. That way you can have your money, you can continue paying your rent, you can continue paying your mortgage. You should be able to get caught up. That way, hopefully, they will not become homeless. Things like that. We can also help people apply for or appeal denials of SSI. Or we can advise people about Social Security, other Social Security benefits. We can help people appeal denials or terminations of SNAP. Medicaid assistance, which, you know, if you have medical bills that you're unable to pay, maybe you've applied for Medicaid and have been denied for one reason or another, you can come talk to us and we can help you figure out whether or not you should be eligible for Medicaid to help pay for those medical bills, or whether or not the hospital where you receive services should be helping reduce that bill through their charity care program. Sometimes individuals are facing a termination of their rental agreement because they have somebody coming in to help them. They need some care in the home. And the landlord doesn't like the fact that they've got somebody coming into the home. We can advise the individual, well, maybe you need to ask for a reasonable accommodation because of your disability. There's all sorts of things that we can advise people about that might help them be able to maintain, keep their housing. Okay, so looking forward then. We partner with the AAA agencies. We refer clients back and forth to each other. The AAA agencies provide all sorts of services. They contract with us to provide the legal services. So if they have clients that they are serving in other areas who are experiencing homelessness or housing issues, they can refer them to us. We welcome partnerships and consultations with other agencies relating to housing and homelessness. And we are also hoping to develop a program to help us identify clients who are at risk of financial abuse, elderly clients, 60 plus, who are at risk of financial abuse so that we can help them prevent problems like non-payment of rent. And that's what we are hoping to do. We're looking to obtain some funding to be able to do that. And that's it for me.
If you can pass your questions to the ends of the tables, and I will collect them.
Nobody has any questions for us? We were so thorough. No questions. Covered.
Yeah.
Question that I didn't write out. It was based on one of your statistics that 50%, if I got this right, people living in retirement homes are on Medicaid.
As nursing homes.
Nursing homes,
Yeah.
thank you, is why, and I'm not familiar so much with the Medicaid program, but why are people denied Medicaid? In other words, why isn't Medicaid used more by elderly to get sufficient housing?
So Medicaid won't actually pay for housing. They will pay for a nursing level of care, right? But Medicaid does not reimburse or provide housing at this time. There are some waivers that may provide some rental assistance, but it's very few and far between.
So backing up then, if I can have a little conversation with you, is I believe, and I didn't track, a large number of elderly unhoused people have medical issues. So again, would they be able to apply for Medicaid, since it sounds like Medicaid is used for assisted housing or for nursing?
Yeah, I think I understand your question. So a lot of people do have Medicaid, but as you've probably seen in the landscape, there are going to be a lot of changes to Medicaid on who's eligible and who's not. The rental assistance I was talking about from a waiver perspective, we're talking a couple hundred spots. So it's really not going to make any sort of large impact on the overall homelessness in the state of Iowa, let alone in Johnson County. And those spots can take years to get on. So it's kind of a specialized Medicaid. There's an elderly waiver as well. But even within that, to try and get rental assistance is almost nearly impossible. So really, Medicaid would not be, in some states is a solution to have a way to pay rent, particularly in those higher affordable, not lack of affordable housing communities. But the state of Iowa is currently not one of them.
We do have several written questions. We had structured this to have the questions in advance or written down. So I'm going to try to go through the ones that were submitted in advance first, and then if we have time, take ones that were not submitted in advance. So the first one was, how important is affordable housing in limiting homelessness? And I think that's maybe been answered.
Yeah, I think it is the answer in limiting homelessness. That is the long-term big answer.
Why do you think the older population is the fastest growing number of cases of homelessness?
Yeah, as we get medical interventions, as they're progressing, as we're having better medicine, people are living longer. We see that across the board. Our medical field is keeping people alive longer, which is great. And that means our homeless population is aging faster than anyone because the whole population is aging.
What are the solutions, short-term and long-term, within our community and as we raise the next generation? I know each of you have gone through some solutions from your own perspective. Is there maybe something overarching or?
The question was, as we raise the next population.
Right, as we raise the next generation, it's short and long-term solutions. I think
I don't mean to harp on it, but I can't stress enough the importance of the creation of affordable housing. I think that they mentioned in the documentary in Portland, they need 550,000 units to meet their need. We don't have such a high hill to climb here locally, but there's still a hill for us to climb on the number of affordable units we need to match the population we have of people who need affordable units. So continuing to stress the creation of affordable housing. One of the things at the city we've really been looking at and stressing is making sure that we're creating housing opportunities for low-income households in high-opportunity areas where kids are going to thrive and have the opportunity to have economic sufficiency as they grow older to help some of this systemic change. And just the creation of affordable housing units. I will get it tattooed on my head.
Housing. The other thing to consider is, when I started this work a decade ago, and I had a conversation about this yesterday, is we thought, the vacancy rate a decade ago was 0.5%, 1%. It's now closer to 7%. And we're not doing any better. We're actually worse. And part of that is when you're looking at a 7% vacancy rate, that means that there are units. There are open units. Right now we have, I believe, about 65 individuals sleeping outside, and there are way more than 65 units that are available in our community. However, as you mentioned earlier, a one bedroom, the fair market rate, $980?
$921.
I knew you would know it exactly. $921, and you live on Social Security, SSI, Social Security income, and you make $965. There is not a landlord in this community that is going to approve you for that unit because the likelihood of you being able to pay your rent is pretty much zero. I always hear this statistic, like most people can't handle a $400 emergency, right? It's like you don't have enough saved to handle a $400 emergency. Well, when you make $965, you can't handle a single emergency. And so that's why those subsidies, those shallow subsidies, vouchers, and then income-based housing is essential to solving the issue. And one other thing I want to highlight that there was some work done recently to bring ADUs to the community. I think it's an interesting, creative way to increase the affordable housing stock. So accessory dwelling units. So it's a kind of what do they call it? Like
tiny homes in the backyard.
Yeah, tiny home or like a granny home or whatever.
Mother-in-law suite.
Mother-in-law suite. I like that one better. But it is an interesting way, right? If you think about, particularly for aging, if you're fortunate enough to have an extra space to be able to build something like that, it's an interesting idea.
Yeah, and correct me if I'm wrong, but my impression is that most landlords in Iowa City require triple the rent in income.
We've
So they won't
actually been
approve
seeing
you.
an increase in that. We have several pretty big landlords who are requiring 5 times the income, 5 times the rent income.
Yeah. So if you make $900 a month and there's an apartment for $700, they're looking for $2,100 in income or more.
I think that R1 mentioned this earlier. This is the source of income protection that was removed at the state level. The city of Iowa City had a local ordinance giving source of income protection to households. The state repealed that, made it unavailable for us to utilize effective January 1 of 2023. And what that meant was that landlords couldn't say, well, I see you have $2,000 a month income, but 600 of it is coming from the housing authority. I don't want you as a tenant. They couldn't say that. Now they can. They can look at an applicant and say, you have a voucher, I don't want you. That source of income protection never once ever said a landlord couldn't screen for criminal background, for landlord reference. It just meant they couldn't discriminate upon the source of their income. And I think there was a lot of misinformation about what that source of income discrimination meant. All it meant was the source of income. It didn't mean landlords had to take vouchers. In no world has a landlord ever had to take a voucher. My job would be so much easier if they did have to. They don't have to. Never have. And so on a statewide level, the state said that we're not going to do that in the state of Iowa, even though there are only 2 communities in Iowa that were doing it. Iowa City was one of them. The state decided they felt passionately that we shouldn't do that here locally.
Could I ask, you're also working with surrounding counties, I understand, under Washington County. Would it simply be easier? I mean, obviously, the student population increases the rent within Johnson County, or here, Iowa City especially. What's happening in Washington, and I guess you mentioned one other county possibly, to move into rural areas? I understand medical care might be needed, and it's more available here. What research has been done into creating options outside of the student population here, basically taking the house?
Sure. Yeah, we also serve Iowa County was the other county. The things that are here that people need, jobs, the jobs are here. People would be driving into this community, and most of our voucher holders don't have vehicles. That's not something that people living at $15,000, $12,000 a year can afford typically. So our voucher holders really rely on fare free transit in Iowa City. So yay for Iowa City for giving us fare free transit. And it's the jobs, right? And it's school capacity, and it's whatever other needs, like you said, medical care. Certainly we have people who make that choice, right? You can find a lower cost of living, but there also aren't a ton of affordable housing options in those communities either. Rental housing in Washington County, Iowa County. Before I came to the city, I worked for almost a decade in a program that housed homeless veterans at HACAP. And what I'll tell you as somebody who's housed somebody in pretty much every community in Johnson, Iowa, and Washington counties, oddly, it's easier to find affordable housing in Johnson County than it is Iowa or Washington, just because of the availability of the stock of housing.
Okay, it is 5 after 2, so if you had to leave at 2, we are running over. I am happy to stay and take more questions. I just wanted to let you know if you have to go, that's what time it is. Getting to a couple more of the ones that we had in advance. Someone asked, why didn't people learn from the Great Depression and conditions during their lives and not save more money? If they had foresight, they would have cushions to sustain themselves and they wouldn't be homeless. Before I turn that over to the panelists, I just have a personal anecdote about that, and anecdotes aren't data, but my mother's in her 80s, and on a secretary's salary, she saved relentlessly and saved $500,000. That will buy 4 years and 2 months in a nursing home. $10,000 a month. Your $500,000 is going to buy you 4 years and 2 months of care. That's it. So when people ask about saving, lots of people save lots of money and they still end up in dire straits, because after that money's gone, then what? So I don't know if you guys have other answers. But.
I do. I have several thoughts, and I'm actually really glad that someone asked that question, because there are people who, like your mom, did save a lot of money. And then, like the gentleman that we met on the video, had a predatory loan. There are people who have, I actually know of someone who was in shelter just at the end of last year, owned their own home, had about $500,000 saved, met a scam. Gone. They lost everything. A couple. They lost everything because they thought by sending money to someone in Egypt that gold would come. And, I mean, there are a lot of reasons why seniors are taken advantage of. And I think you could probably talk about financial abuse as well. That's just for folks who were able to save, right? But then you have folks who maybe worked at the grocery store their whole life. Maybe they had a diagnosed disability and really had to live off of Social Security for the majority of their life. They can't afford to live. They just can't. There's nothing that you can't save zero. And so I think there are lots of reasons, and I could probably name 200 as to why you can't save money, and I probably qualify for 78 of them. But I think, if we look at the economy right now, it's a real struggle for anyone to be able to save money. So, but I don't know if you have anything to comment on about financial abuse, but I think it's very important here.
Well, I mean, yeah, there are for older folks, there are sometimes family members who take advantage of them. As folks age, sometimes they need help that they didn't need when they were younger. They bring in family members or sometimes neighbors or other people who take advantage, frankly. People who they meet, wherever, at the grocery store, online. Sometimes people are lonely. They reach out online. They find people. Anyway, they get taken advantage of. Sometimes they invite people in to live with them. Sometimes these individuals say, I need money to pay for whatever. And folks will just hand over money because they trust. And so, if you don't have someone who is watching out, who that individual trusts and who is trustworthy, there can be quite a catastrophic, what's the word I'm looking for? Result. There you go. Quite a catastrophic result financially. So they can lose a lot of money, and they can end up, if not homeless, close to homeless. So that, that's just one thing that can happen. Not to mention the fact that, minimum wage has not gone up since whenever.
Yes. $1 saved in 1985 is worth 33 cents now, basically. 1985 dollars are worth a third of what they were then.
Can I just add one more thing to that last? Sure. I think the other thing that's really important to remember is that if you lost all of your money today and you lost all of your housing, would you have any number of people that you could call and say, hey, I had a really catastrophic event in my life. I was diagnosed with cancer. I spent all my money on chemo, whatever the case is. Do you have someone in your life you can stay with? I do. I feel very fortunate for that. I feel very lucky to be able to have that. What was the theme, though, that we heard on the film? These folks either are alone or feel alone. So they end up, because of shame, because of worry, because of embarrassment, they end up sleeping outside. They end up sleeping in their car, then they lose their car, right? So there are, a lot of times people want to say, oh, well, it's their fault, it's their fault, it's their fault. Even if it is, even if it was my fault that I lost all my money, I still have people that I can rely on in my life, and a lot of people don't. And so I think it's really important that we remember that that level of shame can prevent people from doing anything and send them into places like addiction, send them into places of despair, send them into suicide. And so I think we have to keep that in mind.
And I'll just put my one note to that. The other thing, if nothing else appeals to that question, if nothing else fits, financially, it is cheaper to house somebody experiencing homelessness than it is for them to remain homeless. From a societal level, it costs about a third of the cost to permanently stably house someone than it does for them to remain unhoused and access emergency medical services, emergency police services, and other services in the community. If at the end of the day, if nothing else resonates, it is financially more efficient to house a person who is unhoused than to leave them unhoused.
Okay, I'm going to ask panelists, are you able to stay? It's almost 2:15 if...
For a little bit?
Yeah. Okay. Because, and I've got 2 of these cards, and then we'll start taking questions from people who are raising their hands. One just asks, how long does it take to get assistance at legal aid? I think that's quite an easy one.
Oh, okay. Well, it depends. At the hotline, the way we handle people who ask for assistance is you call, you leave a message on a voicemail. We have our screeners listen to the voicemail messages every day. They return the most urgent ones the same day or maybe the next day. If they get the message toward the end of the day, it might be the next day before they get back to you. Right now, we are only taking emergency cases because we are short-staffed. So if it's not an emergency case, if it's, for example, you want a will and there's no urgency to it, we might not get back to you for a few weeks. So there's that. Generally speaking, Iowa Legal Aid in general, we do take intakes every day on the phone. You can apply online. You can walk into one of our 10 regional offices around the state and do an application that way. So you can talk to an attorney relatively quickly. If you need more than just advice, depending on what the issue is, you might be able to have somebody represent you in an eviction, the next day, possibly, if that's where your issue is. If you need assistance with a domestic abuse protective order, there's a hearing next week. We do our best to represent in those urgent type cases if we have somebody available. If you're wanting help filing a case and there's no urgency to it, that might be a little more, might take a little more time to get somebody available to help with that. So it just kind of depends.
Okay, this is interesting to me. I don't know the answer. Why are landlords able to deny people with no address or who are coming from shelter house?
No, please.
Landlords technically can deny for anything that's not a protected class. Lack of address or lack of a permanent residency is not a protected class. They could say, I don't like people whose names start with A, and as long as that trait didn't associate with a protected class, like that may be associated, for example, it might have a disparate impact on people who are Sudanese who have a name starting with A. So if there is not a disparate impact, they can choose any criteria they'd like. As somebody who's spent many, many years housing people, as Rachel has, as several people in the audience have, the reason that landlords deny people with that address is because they assume a set of behaviors and personality traits based on the address, which are just universally not true, but there's an assumption about it.
Okay, you had a question.
I just wanted to ask about or comment about the role of institutional investing in housing and the impact it's having on the availability of housing, especially rental housing.
You said institutional investment?
Yeah.
Meaning?
Investor-owned houses. In the first quarter of 2025, 27% of all U.S. home sales were by investors. In 2024, the largest number homes ever were purchased by investors. I think it's becoming a big challenge, a big problem we need to pay attention to.
Yeah, I think that I'm not going to have any great like data off the top of my head for you, but what I'll tell you is this something that we talk about a lot locally. About Rachel mentioned the 7% vacancy rate, and something that we don't have a strong grasp on because it's difficult to track in any way. How many of those are because they're, for example, Airbnbs or short-term rentals, right? Are these actual long-term rentals that are available, or is our vacancy rate reflecting something that isn't available to the general population? And we don't right now have great ways to track those things, but anecdotally I can tell you, yeah, I mean, across the country we're seeing that as a trend, and we are catching up on the data collection side to try to see a local impact to that.
Okay, I'm in the back, and then
I've got 3 quick questions. Section 8, still have applications for Section 8, or has that been closed off? I thought it's been closed off.
The waiting list is closed, meaning we're not taking new applications. We have about 2,400 people on our current wait list. We're still serving 1,595 voucher holders. Just our wait time is about 5 years. Yeah.
Do you take vouchers for mobile homes?
It's a complex answer, but roundabout, yes. If Rachel owned a mobile home and she was renting that to Liz, that rental is eligible to use a voucher at. If Rachel owned the mobile home and was trying to live in it and pay her lot rent with it, we can use a voucher for that, but her income would have to be low enough that the voucher would kick in. So yes, with some...
One quick opinion, checking around the country with homeless people and things like that, I think we kind of look at housing in the wrong ideal. I think housing could be RVs, could be small houses, could be mobile homes, rather than just, existing houses or apartments. And I think that can be done much more reasonably priced. For example, in West Liberty, they have a mobile home park that they're building, $350 rent, guaranteed for 10 years. I don't know why we can't do that in this city. Because, you mentioned about the cost for having them homeless is a lot more than if they were in housing. So I think we need to look at the bigger picture. And I think that's important, just my opinion.
I think you're right. I mean, there's creative solutions across the country that we can look at and replicate. I don't think there's one answer. I don't think the answer is building a 200 unit apartment complex all over the place, right? Like that is an A answer, but it's not the only one.
Well, yeah, I think this is a good, in this vein, like, can you talk about protections, like in general, and how policy, like you mentioned how it was legal just a while ago, illegal to discriminate against the voucher, or to not, for property owners, no, to not take the voucher, but now they can deny it. Like, how does that, the work of protections, the work of this, the whole concept of protections of all, for all people, to prevent homelessness, the eviction work, like to prevent evictions, to have an intervention that is timely. Like, how can we, because you can build, like the building of new housing solutions and even the vacancies and different, that's like one realm of housing, but then the concept of protections is like this other really important preventative realm, like prevent the homelessness from someone who just 1 minute ago had a house, like, or an apartment, and the next moment they don't. So it's interesting to think about it.
I think there's lots that goes into preventing homelessness, and something that really in our community didn't come about until COVID. So there was an eviction moratorium from the state, so no one could be evicted. And then there was an infusion of funding to be able to help folks who got behind on their rent for whatever reason to be able to stay in their housing. There's a really great partnership with Iowa Legal Aid and Shelter House. There's an eviction clinic at the Johnson County Courthouse. So anyone facing an eviction can go and meet with an attorney, meet with a Shelter House staff member to see if they're eligible for rental assistance and representation. The tricky part is we are hitting the COVID cliff, meaning a lot of that money is gone. And it has really fallen a lot on local municipality, city, county, and now fortunately there's some state money money through the Iowa Finance Authority to prevent homelessness for non-payment of rent. There's lots of reasons why you can lose your housing, right? But for non-payment of rent specifically. The other thing I wanted to say that is not necessarily a protection and prevention, but it is a protection to ending. Right now, if you have an eviction filed on you, so R2 over here, his landlord was really annoyed with her one day. She was 3 days late on her rent, and her landlord went and filed an eviction. It was dismissed because R2 got an attorney, she paid her rent, everything's fine. Everything's fine in the land of R2's housing. Unfortunately, R2 now wants to move. And that eviction filing, even though it was dismissed, is still on her record. So it can sit there in perpetuity and it will not come off, even though it was dismissed. So there is a possibility to expunge evictions. That is not legal in the state of Iowa, but it could be. There are lots of states who have eviction expungement options. So let's say 10 years ago, I had an eviction. That could still impact my ability to obtain housing today. So that is just kind of there's a lot of really creative solutions. I think after a decade in this work, though, I think my only solution now is just more housing. But there are a lot of really creative solutions.
Rachel and I are getting matching tattoos.
Yeah.
More housing.
More housing.
Yeah.
On that note, I think we should end it. We have gone out quite a bit over. If you do have remaining questions, I think our panelists might be willing to talk to you personally. But I think we're going to end the program. And thank you all for coming. Thank you so much.
Thank you.